when it comes to personal development, it's you, it's on you, and it takes work. And just like getting a rocket out of the atmosphere, it's hard work in the beginning, but once you break free of the resistance, it's joyful.
Welcome back, everybody. This is the Brainwave Exchange podcast. I'm Jason Davis Cook, joined as always by the incomparable Anthony Torres. Anthony, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Jason. Thanks for asking.
All right. We are joined today by Mark Devine. Mark is a thought leader, an innovator, a Navy SEAL commander, a best-selling author, a yoga master, an entrepreneur, and a change maker. Mark, did I miss anything?
No, that's fine. You could probably delete a few of those things.
We're so excited to have you here today. I know Anthony and I both have read the Unbeatable Mind book and gotten some really, really cool tips from that. I know I was telling Anthony before we started recording this that box breathing has been an incredible tool for me to kind of calm down in the high stress environment of software engineering and can be very fast paced, very chaotic, and just taking a minute to just focus on breathing has been such a tremendous help. So one, thank you for that.
Yeah,
and so I'm curious.
Box breathing is free medicine.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I'm curious how your journey took you from being a Navy SEAL to where you are now, trying to help other people lead with compassion and courage.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, the journey started before I was a SEAL. You might remember from the book, I was a CPA on Wall Street.
Right.
Working first for Coopers and Lybrand, which is now PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then Arthur Andersen, which no longer exists. And what was unique about that 4-year period where I was getting my MBA at Stern Business School and working toward my CPA and working full time was that I had this sense early on that I was a lifetime athlete, and I was a competitive athlete in high school and college. So when I got to New York City to start that kind of torturous 4 years, I knew that I was going to continue to train. And I looked around and saw these, really unhealthy people. I said, that's not me. So I'm going to train, right? So I would train every morning, usually a long run and a stretch session. I would train at lunchtime. I'd go to the gym and do what we now know as a high intensity interval workout. But back then it was just like me pissing on a bunch of equipment saying, don't touch this. And I would just go as fast in a circle as I could, break a mean sweat, and then go back to the office and sweat for like an hour and a half. Anyways, and I had to be at NYU, which is down the old World Trade Center, at 7:30 to start night classes. And Coopers, we were in a cohort, so Coopers would let us off around 5:30. And the idea was, give you time to go home, change, prep for school, eat, But yours truly said, look at that. That's a 2-hour training block. So I was wondering, what can I do in that 2 hours? And I remembered my college freshman roommate had gotten into karate, Shotokan karate. And what was noticeable about it is, he was a real jerk his freshman year. And went out of his way to piss people off. So he had a pretty low self-esteem. And then he started this karate program, and by the time he was a senior, he was a black belt, and he had completely transformed. Right? This guy was extremely respectful and humble and was heading off to Japan to teach English and to continue his karate studies. And I remembered that. And I thought, I wonder if that would be something, that would be good for me because, 4 years of college, I had a degree, but I certainly didn't transform, not like I saw David. And I was looking for transformation. I grew up in a, pretty traumatic family, probably not so different than a lot of folks, but a lot of alcohol, a lot of rage. My father, some abuse, obviously. So, there was some emotional blockages, and I was pretty shut down emotionally, and obviously overcompensating by trying to be the perfect, MBA, CPA, whatever, right? Putting points on the board. Pretty classic. So anyways, I thought, well, martial art would be really cool. And it just so happens that on 23rd Street, right, one street up from where I was living, Manhattan, there was the World Sado Karate headquarters. And I really stumbled upon it one day. And I went up and I met my first true mentor, my first true teacher. The student is ready, the teacher appears, and there's Tadashi Nakamura, who was the founder of this style of karate called Seido. And this guy he was different than anybody I'd ever seen in my life. Not just, because he was a badass, which he was, but he was also had this lightness about him, this spontaneity, this playfulness, this abject humility. And I was like, wow, that is rare. I've never seen that. I want to learn that, right? Whatever he's doing. And so I started karate there. Now, this is the part that links back to your question. On a couple months in, I stayed to watch a black belt class on Thursday night. And after the black belt class, the lights went out and people were filing out, and I was kind of like being ushered out. And I said, "What's going on over there?" And there were a small group, like maybe 8 or 10 people, who were pulling out these little wooden benches, and they lit a candle. And I said, "What is that?" And they said, "Oh, that's the Zen class." I said, "Zen? What is Zen?" And they said, "Well, go get this book by a guy named Suzuki. It's called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Go read that, and then you'll learn all about it." So I did. I was floored. It was my first exposure to the concept of enlightenment, the concept of mastery, the warrior principles of Zen, and the development of the mind that accrues through meditation. I don't think I understood much of the book, but I was hooked. So I asked Nakamura, if I could join as a lowly white belt, because all the other students were black belts. And he said yes. So I started studying Zen at 21 years old. For some reason, I found it was hard at first, but I found it to be very refreshing because of, I grew up in a really small town in upstate New York, like 375 people, surrounded by beautiful, dairy farms and rolling hills. And we spent all of my summers up on Lake Placid, and we had no road access. So we had to take a boat, and my backyard was a mountain range, and I just spent all my time outside. And so I was really, I was just kind of born into silence, except for under my roof. So I spent most of my time outside in nature. And so sitting on that Zen bench felt similar, right? I was like, outside the window is this cacophony going on in New York, honking horns, people all over the place. But sitting on that little Zen bench, I was able to find peace. At any rate, so I could go on and on about what happened, but it literally completely transformed not just what I thought, the content, but literally how my mind worked. And I began to open up and really tap into my imagery capability. I had images come to me. I had sensations and feelings and experiences that I'd never had before, some metaphysical and some beyond, really kind of non-dual experiences where I would just completely drop out of time and space. And when I would come back, I always come back with like a gem, with some knowingness. And I kept coming back. This is after about 9 months or a year, maybe a little longer, of doing this work, with this the sense that I was a warrior. I was meant to be a warrior. That's what I'm here for. And so I had to sit with that, guys. I'm like, if I'm a warrior, what the hell am I doing as a CPA? Not to say, there aren't some warrior CPAs out there, right? I'm sure there are, but, they weren't really kind of a hand-in-the-glove fit. So I had to start asking better questions. And so I took up journaling. I started to contemplate the what ifs, like, what if I did something that was a warrior thing? And what could that look like? It's rare because most of the SEALs that I train now, because they've, grown up with the movies and the TV shows, they know they want to be a SEAL from like the age of 12. And I didn't even know what the SEALs were when I was 21. There were no movies. There were a couple old dusty Vietnam books, but that's about it. And they were a secret organization. So I didn't come out of those meditation sessions saying I want to be a Navy SEAL. I just knew I was meant to be a warrior. So, like I said, I started to ask how. And that's when, the second really synchronicity happened was I walked past a recruiting office one day, and there was a poster on the wall, on the window. And the title of the poster was "Be Someone Special." Didn't say anything about the Navy SEALs, but there were guys doing stuff that I just was mesmerized. I was like, holy shit, that is cool. There are guys free falling at night into the ocean, and there was, a little mini submarine, and, in the corner you could see a little sniper in the hide sight. You could barely see him. You know what I'm talking about. Those imageries were really appealing to me. And I said, that's it. Whatever those guys are, that's what I'm going to do. That's how I'm going to be a warrior. So anyways, the rest is history. There's a lot more detail there about how I used the meditation and mental training to prepare for the SEALs. But suffice to say, I got in Officer Candidate School with a direct path to SEAL training, BUDS Class 170. And in 1989, November of 1989, I got my MBA, I got my CPA certificate, I got my first degree black belt, and then I walked away from it all. Went to Officer Candidate School, took a 90% pay cut, and went to SEAL training the following year. And Class 170, we had 185 guys start, and 19 of us graduated, and I was the honor man, number one graduate. And my entire small boat crew, who I started with on the first day, graduated with me, because I credit all that to my meditation. So fast forward, and I kept training, and I stuck with it, but just like you guys mentioned to me, your passion for development and kind of exploring the boundaries of performance, and for me, it was also leadership and teamwork, team building. I just, I was on fire, right? I was started to consume everything I could. I doubled down on my practice, and believe it or not, in the SEALs, I had a lot of time to practice, which is interesting because we were always training, always gone. So you think you don't have time to practice, but in a typical op, you have like 23 and a half hours of utter boredom and 30 minutes of sheer terror. And so during the boredom, I literally learned to take my practice with me. I kept it in my back pocket. I didn't need to go to a monastery or I didn't even need my Zen bench, right? I learned what they call in the yoga tradition, taking your practice off the mat. And so my practice became an every day, everywhere I was practice. And it had extraordinary benefits, and so I began to I wanted to teach it to SEALs. So I actually transitioned out of active duty and stayed in the reserves. So I have about 10 years active duty and 10 years in reserves. So in the reserves, I was able to get into business. So I became an entrepreneur and launched my first business was a microbrewery called the Coronado Brewing Company. Of course, getting out of the SEALs, I thought free beer for life was a good idea. It probably wasn't the best thing. It lacked a little purpose. But, I kept that idea that I wanted to teach these skills to other warriors, kind of stuck with me. And so I started to do that. I launched a company called NavySEAL.com, and I started to train and prepare SEAL candidates and other special operators through the forums and through the gear and, just little meetup training groups. And then I was hired by the Navy to launch a nationwide mentoring program for SEAL candidates that still runs to this day. And we had a significant impact on the throughput. And then in 2006, I launched SEALFit. And SEALFit is really the beginning of the more creative phase of my life. Right? By then, I had done a lot of emotional development, and my practice had really ripened quite a bit. And I was just tapped into this flood of just creative energy. And I wrote 2 books in 1 year, Unbeatable Mind and The Way of the SEAL. I wrote 8 Weeks of SEALFit. I wrote I developed an entire yoga program for men called Kokoro Yoga. And then I launched Unbeatable Mind program, which is a coaching program. And I continue to run Unbeatable Mind as well as SEALFit to this day. And it's had a pretty profound effect because it's an integration of Eastern principles and Western kind of performance and depth psychology and some Navy SEAL kind of kick-assery. And it has an accelerating effect on personal growth because it's an integrated development. We call it vertical development program. So that's kind of the journey. It's a little bit more than 5 minutes, but I credit it all to my meditation practice, which, was my start journeying inward, and the fact that I started it at a really ripe young age of 21. So I had the benefit of a lot of the neuroplastic shifts and changes that accrue from meditation and mind training. It takes a little bit longer as an adult. You got a few more cobwebs and, rust in there to clear out. But, yeah, and it's part of what I teach today is like, especially, again, in alignment with your mission, Anthony, the world's a pretty, it's kind of a mess right now, and people have lost their way. And there's a lot of forces that are kind of like herding humanity into places that they really shouldn't be going, right? That the individuals really have no personal interest in heading, but they seem to have no choice. And so my mission is to help people find that choice again, to help lead them toward freedom. And freedom is only found on the inside, right? So first you got to find freedom on the inside, and that's freedom from all fear, freedom from unhealthy desires, freedom from anything that's going to hold you back, any limitation or lack. And you find freedom there, then you can find freedom anywhere, right? And you can navigate the vicissitudes of life, no matter how gnarly they are, with grace. So that's my mission, is to train and inspire 100 million people to get on this path that I call Unbeatable Mind. They may not know it's Unbeatable Mind because we have, we've trained thousands, and a lot of them are coaches and trainers and, podcasters and whatnot. So even if it's just 100 million people getting back to breathing in controlled breathing patterns, box breathing, that's good, because that's a doorway in, right? It's a doorway in. So.
Yeah. So I'll interrupt by saying I can at least say that you've influenced the two people on this call. So.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do we count
cool.
towards that 100 million?
Yeah, so it's 99 million.
Yeah.
999,000 and
you got a lifelong work to do here.
Yeah.
Something I wanted to
I
ask
gave myself
you is
25 years to do that. Go ahead.
You're going to hit it, you think?
Oh, yeah. Some people say I already have. But like I said, it's not something I can track. I don't have a particular... It's not like, 100 million people are going to read my books. No, that's not going to happen. But it's the ripple effect, right? We'll have over 1,000 certified coaches soon at Unbeatable Mind. A lot of those coaches have coaching programs themselves. We've worked at a lot of corporations. There's leverage in working with organizations, right? So it's 1,000 points of light, touch points. It's going to be a generation, right? Because this is, the target is 2045, right? So that's quite a bit of time. We've got AI. There's all sorts of ways I can see this playing out. And like I said, it might be for someone who just steals my work and just blows it up. I don't know, and I don't care. The point is what's right for humanity, right?
Yep.
And humanity needs to be led back toward, positivity and abundance, right? As opposed to negativity and violence, which is what it's been kind of steeped in for the last X number of years, hundreds, if not 1,000 years.
Yeah, I had this metaphor come to me the other day when I was thinking about good and evil and light and dark. And I was like, lighting something takes work, right? It takes energy. And then the moment you stop, that's when darkness can seep in. So it's always going to take work to bring positivity and positive energy in. And then the moment we stop, that's when we allow darkness to take over.
That's a good point. I like that. And the other aspect of that is it takes work to light the fire, but it doesn't take much work to keep the flame lit. Right? So the hard part for people is to develop the desire, right? To have that desire for evolution, for self-evolution, and not, expect it to be handed to them on a silver platter or anything to be given them, right? When it comes to personal development, it's on you, and it takes work. And just like getting a rocket out of the atmosphere, it's hard work in the beginning, but once you break free of the resistance, it's joyful, right? It's joyful, and all you need is it's like keeping that flywheel spinning, or once again the rocket's in the atmosphere, it takes barely any energy, and that energy is just a little bit of daily practice. And then, like I said, eventually you don't even need to have a meditation session, it is with you all the time. Your practice is each breath. And so with each breath, you keep that fire lit, and the darkness will never come. And eventually you enter a permanent state where the darkness it's impossible, because the light is self-generating, because you are the light. All we got to do as human beings is remove the obstacles to the light that is us. Right? So I think the hardest part is just getting started. And in the West, we're so trained to and conditioned to look for evidence. You know, you guys are scientists, you know, software developers, and so you're like, oh yeah, we gotta have evidence of our progress. Well, when it comes to development, unless you're doing physical development, right, it's difficult to look for concrete evidence. It's not linear, you know what I mean? It's not like, oh yeah, I've got 5 days of worth of work, so I'm gonna show a bigger muscle in my head. No, right? It shows it up in spontaneous ways, in insights, in sudden knowingness, in transformations of how you see the world and how you relate to it, and openings of the heart, and beginning to experience your intuitive intelligence, right? So those things are really what you look for, but you don't look out there for them. You have to develop the capacity to look inward and to see with your real eyes, right? And that's what we mean by real eyes, right? You're looking with your real eyes, which are inner. And again, I think the world, for a reason, is organized to prevent people from doing that, right? You know, that corporations who are trying to sell you goods don't want you sitting in silence, not buying their goods, and seeing in that silence you don't need the shit that they're trying to sell you, right? And you know, the big food companies don't want you to sit in silence and box breathe and get all healthy, because then you won't buy their crap. And the medical industry and the pharmaceutical industry doesn't want you to sit in silence and purify your mind and get rid of anxiety and depression, right? Because then they won't be able to sell you their crap. And you know, if everyone was free, we wouldn't need a government, right? So the government doesn't want you to sit in silence and to be free. So the system is organized to keep everyone radically distracted and actually separated from themselves, and always on the move, and always in anxiety and stress about money. You know, our whole economic system is basically entrapment, right? You start out in the hole, and then you spend the rest of your life trying to claw, and you can never claw out of the hole, because government's always taking 50-60% of your paycheck, and you know, you got debt, and I could go on, right? But we are not free. Right? You could almost say that we're all basically slaves until but you have the key. Or you could say we're kind of in this like opaque jail. You can't get out of jail until you find the key, and the key's inside of you. So everyone's looking in the wrong place. They're all looking for it outside, in the next thing that traps them even deeper into the prison. So sitting in silence is it's the most important thing you can do. Don't waste time not doing it.
One of the things you said earlier about being really truly free was about eliminating all of the sources of fear. Because if you're not scared anymore, then you can be truly free. And I know you talk a little bit in Unbeatable Mind about how the human brain is sort of wired to be scared of things that might be dangerous to you, from just the animalistic monkey brain piece, like survive at all cost. How can you help people to start to beat back those instinctual thoughts of fear in their everyday lives, so that they can start to become more free?
Right. Yeah, and this is one of those kind of conundrums, right, where what I say might sound like a contradiction, but it's not. The body mind, right? By the way, let's start there. It's not separate, right? Your mind is not separate from your body. It is the body. Body is the mind. They are not two. The body mind, when identified as solely as a body, meaning I am this body, will always experience fear, because the body will die, and it can die. And so the only way to deal with that primordial fear is to face your death and to reconcile with it. This is why the Eastern traditions have a rich practice around meditating on your death. The Tibetans are famous for that. Tibetan Book of the Dead is a great example of that. And to begin to loosen the grip of attachment to the body. as a Navy SEAL, what we would do, like every time we step up to the ramp of an airplane and we're going to hurl ourselves out at 20,000 feet in the middle of the night, we're basically committing suicide until we pull that ripcord. So we deal with it through relentless training and constantly courageously facing that fear until we can take the energy, right? You're always going to feel that pit in your stomach, but over time, because of the training, because you're constantly walking to the edge and facing that fear and getting through it, then you begin to transmute that energy that you feel as like, holy shit, I'm going to die, into holy shit, this is exciting. Or this is important, this is my mission. And there's extremely small chance that anything will go wrong. And if it does, I'm trained to deal with it. So you still feel that pit in your stomach, but now the inner dialogue and how you're channeling that energy and experiencing that energy is different, right? And I call that feeding the courage wolf. And by feeding courage wolf, you're starving fear. Because you're right, the brain is wired, right, for survival, and generally that's going to be experienced as, that fight or flight, which always getting triggered, that sympathetic nervous system. And that gets supported by fear-based thoughts, which are conditioned from childhood. So, the more that you feed those fear-based thoughts by dwelling on the fear and not courageously facing it and changing the dialogue about it, then the more that those thoughts will remain, and actually they get reinforced because you're feeding fear. It's this classic, the reason I use that metaphor is because it's so appropriate that, that comes from the story of the Native American, or the Native elder who, is having a conversation with a grandson, and he says there's two wolves that reside in everybody. And the wolf of fear resides in the brain, in the head, and the wolf of courage resides in the heart. And they're always fighting, for dominance. And the kid asks, well, Grandpa, which one wins in the long run? And he says, the one you feed the most. So if you feed fear, fear wins. If you feed courage, courage wins. And courage truly is in the heart. And the word courage, comes from the root word cor, which means heart in French. So in order to starve fear and feed courage, you got to lead with your heart. Get out of your head and into your heart. The reason I chose that word kokoro for my yoga program and this 50-hour SEAL Fit event I run called kokoro is it's a Japanese word that means merging your heart and your mind into your actions. And more succinctly, it also means whole mind, which is the same thing, whole mind. So you can train yourself to lead with courage by training yourself to open your heart, right? There's practices, like the Buddhist loving kindness practice and forgiveness practice, forgiving yourself and forgiving others. There's just really rich traditions that practicing compassion, right? These are really powerful ways to open your heart, to develop that courage. Courage is, based upon what I love Dr. David Hawkins' work, courage is at a consciousness level and a vibrational level, it's a demarcation line between negative energies and positive energies. So everything kind of south of courage, and he ranks them on a scale of consciousness. For those who read the book, Power versus Force, I highly recommend it. Shame is the lowest energy that a human being can possibly have. Anything below shame, is going to be death. And that's shame, on the scale of 0 to 1,000 is about 40. And then from there, you've got, anger and rage and jealousy and, pride even is a negative energy. Pride is right below courage, and courage is at a 200 mark. And above 200 is positive energy, below 200 is negative. So above 200, you got courage, and then you got acceptance and forgiveness, and then love in its various expressions, all the way to universal love. And so individuals, who are operating with the highest level of possible source energies flowing through their bodies are like Jesus or Buddha, and they scaled out at 1,000. And Hawkins said with his system, or the way he was able to test it with kinesiology, which is a test of kind of your consciousness level, the energy flowing through you, that's all the human being body can handle. Enlightenment's at 600, universal love 540, love at 500, intellect at 400, etc. And so if you find yourself in a fear-based negative situation where you're judging something as negative or dangerous, or even you're triggered into shame or guilt, right? Those things. The way out is through courage, is to courageously, get into your heart and forgive yourself, and then move into acceptance, right? Get back into that positive territory, and that requires like forceful means, right? You have to I use a process I call the WIRM process, WIRM. I introduced that in the Unbeatable Mind book. First, you witness that it's happening, and then you interdict that negative, and you say, no, I'm not. That's not happening right now. There's no way I'm going to dwell in that anxiety or that shame or that guilt. I'm going to redirect it to courage, and I'm going to courageously, move into that positive territory, and I'm going to maintain that positive territory with a mantra and with my internal dialogue. So it takes practice, right? So this part of the practice that I teach is that kind of is the active process of curating the quality of your thinking, and then you have the more passive process of cultivating your witness. So this is kind of like part 2, where I said it's a conundrum. Everything that I've just said is from the perspective of the ego being in charge, where the individual is identified as the body and as his thoughts or her thoughts. And so they're living a separate existence, which is, by the way, as you know, that is the normal human experience, right? That's how the brain is wired to experience. Everyone's running around thinking that there's a separate individual self. Well, with practice, the right kind of practice and the right understanding, you're led to this experience of witnessing, which is awareness itself, which is beyond thinking. And when you begin to have that experience, first it's intermittent, then you keep practicing, and then it becomes online longer and longer, and then eventually there's a pop. And the witnessing consciousness or witnessing awareness clicks in as a permanent thing. You could call that awakened awareness. And it was never really asleep. It was just a misperception that you are your thoughts and you are the body. And with witnessing awareness comes online, you're able to look at that from a distance, practically from the awareness perspective, and you see that you are not your thoughts and you're not the body. And so from that perspective, anytime the body mind and the thinking mind experiences fear, you're not moved by it. You don't take it seriously. You're not attached to it. So that's what I mean by freedom. Real freedom from fear comes from the ripening of your practice to where you are now able to witness the stories, including the fear-based stories, and they don't move you. Right? You're not caught up in the dramas anymore. You just watch them. And it doesn't make you detached and cold or aloof. Quite the opposite actually occurs. Like you're actually more engaged. You're more passionate, and you have clarity around your purpose, because witnessing awareness, it's like a revelation, right? There's a revelatory nature to it, where you suddenly gain great clarity, and your heart begins to open more and more until it has that burst of like experiencing that you are everything. Everything is you, right? And so you end up with tremendous amount of love and compassion, right? You're channeling more consciousness, more light, and you're carrying that, and it's affecting everything and everybody you touch. Your world becomes one of grace and peace, and you have no fear of death, right? because you know the body is just a temporary instrument. But you are being lived by God. Right? God is living through these instruments. And so what could there possibly be to fear? Right? So my desire is for those who are ready, for that experience, to have that, right? To find that. And it's difficult to find good teachers, right? There's a lot of misinformation and misguided teaching around this, because one of the rudimentary flaws with meditation practices, people don't recognize that they're not doing it, right? That if the experience that we're looking for, or that is real, is consciousness working through us, and a great clarity and understanding that what you used to think of as yourself is just a bunch of ideas and concepts, conditioned from birth, essentially. It's no more real than Texas is real. Texas is just an idea, just like money is an idea. So you are an idea, but that's not who you really are. So that's true freedom. And then you just see life as this, what they call Lila, the dance of life, dance of Lila. Misperceiving and taking the individual self to be real is the cause of suffering. That's what, that was Buddha's teaching. Anyway, so I think that it's hard for many Americans especially to really appreciate the profundity of this practice, because we don't have mechanisms to teach it, right? It's still kind of stuck in those Eastern spiritual traditions, and especially guys are like, yeah, I'm not really into that yoga stuff, or I'm not going to, go to a Zen monastery, and so one of my missions is to just teach kind of a path back toward freedom and wholeness, and this unbeatable mind, this whole mind experience, using language that you and I, the three of us, can understand, and your listeners can understand, and I call it taking the foo out of the kung fu. Taking practices like box breathing, which is got thousands of years tradition in pranayama, in the yoga tradition, and just breaking it down, saying here's what it is, here's what it's going to do for you, here's how it's going to train your brain and your mind and relieve your stress, and over time it'll condition your body to breathe 6 breaths per minute, which we now know is right the optimal breathing pattern for longevity and health. You're going to be getting more oxygen, more life force in. You'll be more present, because every breath, as you hold, as you follow the breath in the inhale, and you hold the breath, and you follow the breath in the exhale, and you hold the breath, you're deepening your powers of concentration. You're developing attention control, arousal control, and then if you just stick with it and do it every day, eventually you're going to start experiencing the witness. So just box breathing, it's like a Trojan horse. Just box breathing every day for 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening will lead you to freedom, if you did nothing else. So I think that we're at a point in our history where it's necessary to have these teachings like spread more widely to Westerners who are not inclined, who haven't been exposed to them, right? Or maybe they've been hidden from them. Because especially with the onslaught of AI and who knows what's coming for humanity in the next 20, 30 years, we need to develop and tap into our vast potential, right? We can navigate that from the perspective of spontaneous intuition, spontaneous creativity, the type of qualities I saw in Nakamura, type of qualities I try to teach through Unbeatable Mind. You have infinite potential. The only thing blocking it is you, right? It's your ego. It's the rational thinking mind. So we've got to develop leaders and individuals who can clarify and sharpen the sword of their rational thinking mind, but also open up to that witnessing contextual mind and to be able to see, the truth of their reality, that they are and they have infinite potential and infinite abundance. They can find that. It's everyone's birthright.
And so you have all these resources that people can use to try and learn about all of these practices that aren't very well taught, at least in Western culture. You've got books. You've got the Unbeatable Mind program. Can you talk us a little bit about what the Unbeatable Mind program is and what it does for people? Like what sorts of practices you run people through in that program?
Of course. So the program Unbeatable Mind at its kind of meta level is a program of self-mastery in service, right? So that's the yin and the yang. Self-mastery requires a process of integrated development. And so the integrated development for us, we call 5 mountain training. And that's one of the tools, one of the mechanisms, right? One of the models. The 5 mountains are physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, and spiritual. And I use the term kokoro for reasons I explained instead of the word spiritual. So those 5 mountains, what we do is we develop a training plan and we work on them every day, but we work on them in as much as we can in an integrated or together fashion. So, again, back to the Western model has been to separate and particularize things into little buckets. So like you drag your body to the gym and you go train, physically do your physical stuff over there, and you drag your body to church and do your spiritual stuff over there, or to the yoga studio or whatever. Most guys don't do anything on the emotional mountain, right? And they suffer for that. So therapy and whatnot is really helpful. So what we do is say, okay, you're going to have a training plan. You're going to have, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual things that you do. The daily are practices and rituals and practices, right? And so that's another tool. Everyone has a morning routine and an evening routine. We say make them a ritual, because if the ritual has got a sacred quality to it, and you don't ever miss it. So the morning ritual is going to be an integrated practice that includes, and it's going to be different for everyone. We let people customize it, but the recommendations and kind of what I do, the morning ritual is going to have a positivity practice, so gratitude, some journaling, right? Really kind of curating the quality of the thinking that does occur in your mind, and that happens the moment you open your eyes in the morning. It has a contemplation practice, so reading some really powerful words and contemplating your life compared to that, how you could align with it, right? Maybe some more journaling. So I have, a few different teachers that I just contemplate, and sometimes I do over and over, right? And then it'll include the box breathing practice. Now, as I alluded to earlier, for me, and the way I teach it, it's a container for a series of practices. First and foremost, we breathe for arousal control, which is basically rewiring our nervous system to be able to down-regulate and to get out of the hyperarousal. A lot of people are in a state of hyperarousal, which means their nervous system has been atrophied into permanent, stress response, permanent sympathetic nervous system on. And so we a lot of times I just recommend just this for months, to get people down-regulated back into homeostatic balance. So box breathing for arousal control. And then we move into attention control and concentration, where we turn our attention inward and we follow that breath pattern, 5 count in, 5 count hold, 5 count out, 5 count hold. We follow it with our inner eyes, right? And inner senses. We feel it, we watch it closely through all those stages discreetly. And if our mind wanders, then we try to notice that wandering, that distraction quicker and quicker, and snap it back to the attention control. And we try to hold our attention on that pattern for longer and longer periods of time. So it has great benefits for productivity, for deep work, paying attention, becoming less distractible. And then box breathing becomes a witnessing practice, where we start out by simulating, and you'll appreciate this, like partitioning your brain into two hard drives. And on the right, of course, we have the right hemisphere, which is contextual awareness. And in the left hemisphere is your content awareness. That's where thoughts are experienced. And so we have you kind of shift over to the right side, and you set up shop, and you pretend in your mind, and you can use imagery for this, that you're watching your thoughts. And so you're beginning the process of accessing your witnessing awareness by first using your mind to watch itself. It's like a metacognition practice. And that very act, as you keep doing it over time, it just begins to soften and open until you realize that it's just, you're witnessing. And it's like you're looking through the mirror of your mind or the glass of your mind, but you're not thinking. But thinking is happening as if from a distance. And that's when you begin to experience that freedom I talked about earlier. And then at that stage, when you have that experience, then we do what's called turning the light around, where you, instead of looking like out across the expanse and looking to see if you can experience thoughts from a distance, we turn your awareness on itself, and you're looking for light. You're looking for the source, your source. That's profound practice, but it's difficult. You don't want to. Most people can't start there because their mind's bouncing all over the place. You got that monkey mind. So the continuum, box breathing continuum, takes you kind of progressively inward to where you can do that, and you're ready for it when you're ready for it. And then we visualize, and our visualization practice has two parts. First is to you construct a future vision of your ideal self. And I call it your future self, and this takes some time. Because we want the vision to be spurred by a knowingness or even imagery that comes from the heart, right? It's not like a vision board where you're trying to mentally construct it. And we also have practices where we help people clarify what we call your 3 Ps: your purpose, your passion, your principles. And there's like a center sweet spot between when all 3 of those are in complete alignment. And then that'll inform your vision. And it's always, the purpose is always an archetypal energy. Like for instance, I told you I found my purpose on the Zen bench, and it was to be a warrior. It wasn't to be a Navy SEAL; it was to be a warrior. So there's great freedom when you can identify your archetypal energy and say, okay, that's my purpose, as opposed to like a mission that has got some structure or a job or even a career tied to it. Yeah, because if I had said my purpose is to be a Navy SEAL, I'd probably still be in the SEALs. I'd be an admiral. But no, it was to be a warrior, right? So at any rate, so that's all part of the morning ritual. And then the second part of the visualization is to dirt dive your day. And dirt diving is what we did in the SEALs before every dive. You visualize your day. So this whole practice I call winning in the mind before we step foot onto the battlefield. That's the morning. And then what we do is, the way we approach our physical workout, everyone's needs to be physically training. So that's kind of part of it. Like you're committing to that to get healthy. And we have practices, around normal peak performance stuff, right? But, we don't have anything new there. We know that, you need to eat well, and so we'll give you recommendations, and you need to sleep well, and we'll give you recommendations, and you need to train and move your body, and you need to get out in nature, and you need to have a community of positive people to work with and who support you, those types of things. But your physical workout now we turn into a 5 mountain or a 5, element training. So obviously you're doing physical training, but we also bring breathing and visualization and mindfulness into the workout. So you're developing yourself mentally and emotionally and intuitively. And the training session itself is deeply connected to your kokoro, your spiritual sense of like why you're doing it. Your why is to develop. It's not just to look good in a bathing suit. And so with that why, first of all, you never miss your training, and you're deeply appreciative of it, and because you're doing it for a bigger purpose, right? You're not just doing it to like CrossFit to win something. And so you bring that attitude to your training, and suddenly that begins to stimulate and unlock, different capacities that were hidden from you. And then we also have things called spot drills. Like, so during the day, like we've known this for years, but it's now starting to be kind of evidentiary proven that anytime you do something that taxes your mind, even if it's listening to a podcast like this or reading or writing, or a intense meeting, you should take some time to let your brain kind of do nothing so it assimilates and kind of like down regulates. So we ask that everyone, build in 5 to 10 minutes after every, scheduled meetings for 45 to 50 minutes instead of an hour, and take those little chunks of time at the end to do a practice. The practice could be box breathing. It could be just getting up and walking outside, soaking in the sun. It could be 10 sun salutations, right? There's all sorts. It could be, more of an emotional thing where you go tell someone how grateful you are for them, right? Compliment them. And then we have an evening ritual. And the evening ritual is like a bookend to the day. I recommend this happens kind of in between or right at the end of your workday before you maybe park in your garage, do it in your car, or find a beautiful place to sit. And you only need 5 or 10 minutes. And this is a recapitulation. We do a little box breathing, and then in your mind's eye, you go back and you visualize the day from the start, from the moment you open your eyes. And you ask yourself, just like in a SEAL debrief, what went well, what didn't go well, and what did I learn? And whenever you come upon something that didn't go well, you have another added bonus of asking, is there something I need to do to clean it up so there's no regrets, right? I'm not leaving a hurt out there. And this has enormous benefits because otherwise you're going to be processing this stuff during your sleep, right? And generally, most people just throw that stuff away or shove it under the rug. And so you're just, people are just accruing these little tiny regrets, some smaller, some bigger. And those things stay with you. You may bury them, but they're in your subconscious. And so we like to just say, clean up all that regret. You might send a text, you might make a phone call, you might make a plan to do it tomorrow, but just, acknowledge it, forgive yourself, say shit happens. And if you have to make an amends with somebody, then you plan that, you do that. That evening ritual is profound, right? So most of the work is done on the daily basis. And then, what we like to do kind of at the more infrequent periods is to build in challenges and crucibles, things that are going to where you can go deeper, silent meditation retreat, or like a lot of people in our community end up doing the SEAL Fit crucibles. We've got 6 hour, 12, 24, and 50 hours. And these are just like nonstop physical, mental, emotional team training, extraordinary experience, stuff like that, where you're going to challenge yourself because it's similar like to the contrast between Buds and Hell Week, right? Hell Week is 1 week, but so much growth happens in Hell Week. It's extraordinary, right? There's a transcend and include nature of crucibles where you come in as one person and you leave as another. You have greater insight, greater perspective, greater understanding. So we want to build in hard stuff. And it's not just physical, though. It could be hard emotional, like we recommend, deep emotional retreats and spiritual retreats and silent meditations and, things like that, you might face that and go, oh, that's kind of scary. Good, right? If it doesn't suck, we don't do it. And then as you do those things, and like I said earlier, with fear, you keep facing that and you realize, oh, you know what, that wasn't so bad. And you get, so that you really enjoy them because of the growth that accrues. So those are the things that we do. An Unbeatable Mind, it's a community. So it has a community of practice. We have our own, app. We build it upon a Mighty Networks app just because we've tried and failed to develop our own app because, as you guys know, that's tough to do. But Mighty Networks works great for us. We have a 30-day entry program, which is like a challenge, and it's just like 15 minutes a day where I introduce these principles and box breathing and micro goals and feeding the courage wolf and all these little tools, kind of one at a time. That's an incredible program. That's transformative in itself, and I think we charge $39 for it. We have our year-long course called the Foundations course, and we have a coach certification program, which takes 4 or 6 months. So those are the things that we do at Unbeatable. We run a couple events every year, to teach these in person, these skills.
Cool.
It's good stuff. We call it vertical development. Vertical development means the development is meant to change who you are, like I said, not just what you think. Horizontal development is like, chasing the shiny ball of self, improvement, and you're never really changing. You're just learning a new hack or a new skill, and you see a lot of that. What we want to do is engage at a deep level so that through the work you are transformed. Metanoesis, transforming how your mind works, not just what it thinks, the nature of its content. So there's accountability, but the accountability is really self-directed. We want people to kind of like organize into boat crews, we call them, or have a swim buddy to hold each other accountable. It works, right? But this is like they say in AA, it works if you work it.
Right. As we come to an end here, I just want to ask a little bit about your new book, Uncommon. You could tell us what that's about, who that's aimed at, and let us know what you're up to.
Yeah, so this book, Uncommon, Simple Principles for an Extraordinary Life. You can see the cover kind of behind me. It really is kind of a sequel to Unbeatable Mind. It's organized into those 5 mountains. So there's a section for the physical, and there's a section for mental, emotional, intuition, and spirit. And I go into, the rationale for why it's crucial to develop yourself across these 5 mountains. And I give you tools and practices and a lot of stories. The book is geared toward, the last section of the spiritual mountain is a lot about purpose finding. So that's really useful for people who are kind of uncertain and lack clarity about their future. Originally, I wrote the book for those young people kind of like first kind of setting out in life and kind of like, boy, I wish I had this. But, I found Zen. I found Nakamura, and that was extraordinarily useful for me. But would have been nice to have a roadmap. As I got into it, the book, I've been working on this thing for almost 5 years. It's interesting. It's gone through 3 complete revisions. And I was going to self-publish it. And then I got, COVID and then everything. And then I started my PhD, which I'm nearing conclusion of, and business, trying to navigate, like I said, COVID and some kind of mistakes I made in the business. So I really just kind of like sidelined the project. And finally I was like, I got to get this thing off my plate. So I asked my publisher, and they loved it. And so I sold it. Well, I didn't sell it, but the publisher picked it up, St. Martin's. So it's coming out July 15th. Like I said, as I got into it, I realized it's not just people setting out in life that have lack of clarity and uncertainty about their future, especially after COVID and what's going on in this country, in this world. Like a shit ton of people are wondering what's going on and where am I going to go and what am I going to do? And just like, the reason you started this show, you guys, is that a lot of people aren't, more and more people, I should say, aren't satisfied just doing a job, going to work. They want to make an impact. They want to make a difference. And so this book is really for anyone who's just dealing with that fear and uncertainty and doubt and lack of clarity and wondering. Is to give you the tools to like navigate VUCA with grace, to bring clarity back, to move from uncertainty to certainty, right? To be able to deal with the volatility by being the calm in the center of the storm, right? You're the mountain, and all that other stuff is just like a little bit of rain cloud in the distance, right? And to be able to tap into your creativity and spontaneous knowingness, because those are the skills that we need, right? And to get great clarity about how you're going to serve in this world in the future. So I think it's really for anybody who wants to tap into their fullest potential, wants to eradicate that FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and gain clarity, and to lead from a higher, much more inclusive and world-centric perspective, with world-centric care and concern, with great compassion and peace, and where you celebrate the diversity because you recognize the sameness in all beings. That's who it's for.
I will be very much looking forward to reading that one.
Booyah.
All right. Well, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time with us today. It was such a fascinating discussion. Definitely really useful insights and actionable steps in there for people to take to try and improve themselves and make them a little bit maybe less fearful and more free.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And until next time, be well.